Hello, everybody. I'm Melissa Marshall, and I'm going to be the presenter today. I am a white woman. I use she, her pronouns. I have glasses. I have my what I call COVID gray hair pulled back today. And that's about it. And I'm wearing a print top. And I'm joined today by Priya, as you've met, and Shaylin Slazales and Herman Perotti, our co-executive directors. And Jean Grover, who's also on today. So thank you so much for joining us today. Next, please. So the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies is the only US-led organization focused with a mission on equity for people with disabilities and people with access and functional needs throughout all planning, programs, services, and procedures before, during, and after disasters and emergencies. And I want to welcome people that are new to the partnership that haven't done training with us before. And I want to welcome back people who have met us before and worked with us before. And we've said many times, this is multiple exposure material. So going through it more than once won't be to your detriment, because we call this a brain dump. This is a lot of material. And if you come away from this module with more questions or a little bit confused and feeling overwhelmed, that's okay. I'm worried if people come away and think they've got everything, because there's a lot of content. So we're doing a lot of content in a very short period of time. You will get the slide deck and you'll see all of those things today. Next, please. We're going to go over a few ground rules. First is confidentiality. Y'all know about confidentiality. Don't share specifics of situations or anyone's name or something like that. Talk broadly in generalizations of your question around it. Ask questions. If you have a question, somebody sitting next to you has a question, it might not be brave enough or courageous enough to ask their question. Or they might be feeling a little bit introverted or reticent and not want to ask their questions. So be the person who steps forward, who comes forward and ask questions. Next, please. And have fun. The most important rule, ground rule, is have fun. We all learn better and understand things better when we're having a good time. And even though the subject matter is deadly serious, literally, I ask you to set aside that side of yourself for the next 90 minutes and allow yourself to have the opportunity to have some levity. Just fun, not laughing at people, not laughing with people, just laughing at situations and laughing at ourselves, laughing with each other. So have fun. To facilitate you having fun, I have with me in my virtual bag, virtual fabulous prizes. So one of you could leave, possibly more of you could leave here with a brand new Matchbox size virtual car or other virtual prize. Think toys you find at a kid's party. And typically I do actual prizes when I'm in person. So next time I go to Washington State, as soon as the pandemic abates some more, and I see you, I will owe you all a bunch of fabulous prizes. So just keep that in mind. And prizes are awarded to people who ask questions and volunteer answers. They don't have to give the right answer. They can give the wrong answer and still get some extraordinary, fabulous prizes. And Todd said, he asked, I think the word was stupid. There's no such thing as a stupid or a silly or an uninformed question. Please ask all your questions. Okay, next, please. So today's goals, our goals for you are that you build your confidence, because confidence is really important, because your Centers for Independent Living. And by the way, I'm somebody with a disability. I didn't mention that in my audio description. I'm a scooter user and I have cerebral palsy, and I'm also a former center director. So I, like everyone else in the partnership staff, has worked in the Center for Independent Living. How cool is that? So our goal is to build your confidence in understanding how to utilize disaster-related terms and concepts. You're going to find out why that's key. How to maintain or secure your seat at the emergency management tables. And we know you have seats at emergency management tables, so it's more about maintaining than getting your seat for the first time. We know we're going to strengthen your ability to maintain that, because we know how great you are and how you do that. And to advocate for disability rights to local, county, tribal, state, federal, and federal emergency management officials. Next, please. And we also want to build your confidence in understanding how to address systemic barriers to equal access to disaster-related programs and services. I'm sure you've noticed those. How to communicate the community resilience is only possible when it is inclusive of people with disabilities, and how to protect civil rights during disasters, including public health emergencies. Next, please. So disasters are increasing. I'm sure you've heard that if you listen to the news, and they're increasing because of climate change. But there was a 2020 study using FEMA natural disaster data, and it shows how Washington State's disasters have increased by 165%. That's 61 disasters from 2000 to 2017. From 23, the state saw in the prior 2 decades, from 1980 to 1999. And that was data assembled by an insurance company that cited lots of places. And insurance companies really need to know how much money they need to invest in areas and what they need to charge for policies. So they're pretty much experts in doing that. Other thing just wanted to remind you of is that extreme heat kills more people per year than any other weather event. And you know about the heat dome, so I don't have to tell you about extreme heat in Washington State. So you know that, just wanted to remind people of that fact. We call it fast fact. It's not a fun fact, but it's a fast fact. Next, please. Now, this probably isn't surprising to you that people with disabilities are 2 to 4 times more likely to die or be injured in a disaster than non-disabled people. And that's collected by a group that's kind of reputable called the United Nations. And also during Hurricane Katrina, Black people were 1.7 to 4 times more likely to die than white people. And we know there's disparities in preparedness, there's disparities in response, is what we should say, to multiple groups with multiple marginalized identities. So we'll be talking more about that later, but that's just a highlight. Next, please. So what is community resilience that I've been talking about? It's the ability to bounce back and whole community inclusion. And you can't have resilience without the whole community coming back, because we're doing things like childcare and working and contributing to the economy. It's whole community inclusion requires the full commitment to universal design, equal access, and accommodations and modifications as needed. Because even though something's designed universally, doesn't mean it's literally accessible to everyone. And you might have to make alterations and modifications to that. Next, please. Again, community resilience is only possible when it includes people with disabilities, us, others with access and functional needs. And we're going to talk about access and functional needs a lot later. All community stakeholders and other marginalized communities. Accessible planning, response, and recovery. Next, please. Inclusive emergency management must involve people with disabilities at all stages of the planning and provision of disaster-related programs and services before, during, and after disasters. Doesn't mean you bring a few people with disabilities in randomly after the disaster, or a couple people with disabilities to just do some tokenized planning. It means we're involved fully, all different people with all different kinds of disabilities, and it's disability leadership and people know about disability rights involved in that planning. Next, please. Now, you're gonna learn about some key terms and concepts. And you'll be saying to yourself, I'm gonna go to the next slide. Why is it important to learn key terms and concepts? And at a certain point, you're saying, why does she keep going over these things that I don't know if I'll ever use? And there's too many terms. And why is she going over these terms? And what about the civil rights? When are we going to get to that? Well, we will get to the civil rights, I promise you. And why is it important to lead key terms and concepts? For your credibility, you need to be able to speak the same language as emergency management professionals. And I'd like to invite you to think about something. Remember the last time you were at a meeting, whether it was virtual or in person, I know you're at one, and someone used the wrong term, whatever the wrong term, capital T, capital W, capital T, to describe people with disabilities, to describe multiply marginalized people, they used the wrong term, and how seriously you took them or didn't take them after they said that. Emergency management officials feel the same way, not in a political sense, but we can show we know what we're talking about or we don't know what we're talking about if we use the language that's most appropriate. And guess what? You're going to come away from this armed with the right terms. It's kind of like we never leave middle school. We all want to talk like the cool kids and we all need to learn to talk like everybody else. Next, please. So what are access and functional needs? Individual circumstances requiring assistance, accommodation, modification for mobility, communication, transportation, safety, health, maintenance, etc., due to temporary or permanent situation that limits any individual's ability to take action in an emergency is an access and functional need under FEMA. This includes people who may require assistance, accommodation, or modification due to any situation, whether it's temporary or permanent, doesn't mean they're covered under the ADA, just have a situation that limits their ability to take action in an emergency. Now let's look at some, next slide, please. People with access and functional needs. In addition to people with disabilities, this also includes disabled youth, people who are marginalized, stigmatized, or excluded, older adults, individuals with limited language proficiency or low literacy, people with temporary or chronic health conditions. Like I said, they might not be covered under the ADA, but they're still covered. Pregnant people, people experiencing homelessness, individuals with limited access to transportation or the financial resources to prepare for, respond to, and recover from a disaster. Now, I have a request from you. So show of hands, I want you all to promise this to me. Please don't refer to people, otherwise known as human beings, as AFNs. Try not to use the term AFNs. I'll hear people saying, oh, I got 3 AFNs over there. Todd is affirming that he's going to do that. Todd is the first hand I saw up. So Todd gets, let's see, he gets a silver Corvette that's Matchbox size, that's virtual. Anyone else willing to commit to that? Tell me.
They don't get my car though, right?
What you'll get you have a virtual car, you'll get a car. And Mariah is committing, and Anna is committing, and other people are committing. Mariah gets a Super Bowl with speckles in it. Anna gets an elephant-shaped water squirter, and anyone else gets a virtual fabulous prize of their choice. Please don't call other people AFNs, and it's real easy to do that because access and functional needs does not slip across one's tongue easily, but we don't want to objectify ourselves. So we decided we didn't want to call the special needs people. And we use the term access and functional needs, and that's much better, except when we start being called the AFNs. Yeah, just a thought. So what's a disaster? You're thinking, I know what a disaster is. How did you think I don't know what a disaster is? A disaster is an event that results in a large number of deaths and injuries, causes extensive damage or destruction of facilities that's provide and sustain human needs, and produces an overwhelming demand on state and local government response resources and mechanisms. Okay, next please. It's also an event that calls severe short-term, long-term effect in general economic activity, and activity that affects local and severely affects local, state, and private sector capabilities to begin and sustain response activities. So that's what a disaster is in technical terms, okay? Next, please. Now, FEMA further classifies emergencies and disasters. So emergency managers look at disasters by size and type and number of issues that need to be addressed. So there's minor emergencies. So I'll give you a spoiler alert. There's no such thing as a minor emergency when it happens to you. Limited and potential emergencies, same thing, and a major disaster. Next, please. So what's a minor emergency? Again, this isn't minor to the human beings that it happens to. Residential fire, obviously a big tragedy, but it doesn't take a lot of resources to deal with it is what they're looking at, and it's not a huge area. Localized chemical spills, storm damage from like wind, hail, or ice. Next, please. Limited potential emergencies are usually small-scale localized incidents that are resolved quickly using local resources. Now, quickly is FEMA language, so I want to put that in air quotes. So that's quickly in the from the perspective of the federal government, but includes localized flooding, snowstorms, and drought. Next, please. What are major disasters? You know what major disasters are: large-scale flooding, you experience it, wildfires, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Next. Sorry about that. And again, Washington state disasters are things like earthquakes, landslides, tsunamis, severe storms, wildflowers, droughts, floods, and volcanoes. You kind of got them all in Washington state. Next slide, please. Governors or tribal chief executives must request a disaster declaration from the president. Sometimes people say, it's a federally declared disaster. And if you ever wondered what that means, it means the governor or the chief tribal executive requests a disaster declaration from the president. And next slide. An emergency declaration supplements state or local Indian tribal government efforts in providing emergency services such as protection of lives, property, public health, and safety, or to lessen or avert the threat of catastrophe in any part of the United States. So that's an emergency declaration, not a disaster declaration. We just said what an emergency is. That's an emergency declaration. Next, please. And an emergency declaration, what it does is it allows federal assistance to come into the state. Money comes into the state, but that assistance is limited. And the declaration has to be initiated, and it's only assistance to the state. There's no assistance to individuals in an emergency declaration. And it can provide for evacuation as well. Next, please. For major disaster declaration, it must be found damage of such severity that is beyond the combined capabilities of state and local governments to respond. The county, the town, the state do not have the resources to respond. Then you can ask for major declaration in order, it has to be, but that has to be found. And a major disaster declaration provides a wide range of federal assistance programs for individuals and public infrastructure, including funds for both emergency and permanent work. Next, please. And assistance is available when a major disaster is declared. Federal assistance is based on what is requested by the governor, chief tribal executive, and identified needs. Not all programs are activated in disasters. I've had people say to me, but Melissa, we need this in our state and we're entitled to this program. Why hasn't it been activated? It's been activated because maybe you don't need the program in your state. And typically states pay a 25% match. So it's 75% from the federal government, 25% from the state. And maybe they don't want to pay the 25% for that. Maybe they feel like that's excessive. Maybe they feel like they don't really need that program. So that's the factor behind it. Next, please. Now, questions from you. What questions do y'all have?
So this is Todd, Melissa. And I'm sorry if it's protocol to raise my hand, I will.
You're fine.
And you, okay.
We have a small group today, so you're fine.
Thank you. I did when the tribal leader for the tribal nations within the state of Washington, if they request that declaration, obviously that's a little bit more local. Do they have to at all request the declaration, or is it strictly the governor when it comes to major disasters that would initiate individual assistance and public assistance?
It's the governor or chief tribal executive.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay,
great. Thank you. And for your question, Todd, I'm going to give you, let's see what I have in my bag, my virtual bag of virtual fabulous prizes. I am going to give you a plastic T-Rex dinosaur about the size of my thumb.
Ooh.
Okay.
Love it.
Other questions? Okay, let's go to the next slide, please, then, Priya. We're going to talk about FEMA services and programs. Next. So remember how I said that there is public assistance available? And there are programs available under FEMA. We're going to talk about what those are, what they do, a little bit about what they don't do. There are 3 FEMA programs and services. The first is public assistance, abbreviated as PA. The second is individual assistance, abbreviated as IA. We're going to talk about both of those today. And the third is hazard mitigation hazard mitigation experience. And because of the amount of time we don't have today, we're not going to talk about hazard mitigation assistance, aside to say that it exists. So, next slide, please. So public assistance breaks into 2 main categories. Category A is debris removal, kind of one thing, Cat A. We say cat for category. So if I say Cat A, then it's category A. And category B, emergency protective measures, which is something you all need to know about and learn about. You'll find out why in a second. Next, please. So public assistance Cat B. Emergency protective measures conducted before, during, and after an incident are eligible if measures eliminate or lessen immediate threats to lives, public health, or safety, eliminate or lessen threats to or significant additional damage to improve public or private property in a cost-effective manner. Next, please. Eligible emergency protective measures and costs include, but are not limited to, that's the lawyer that lives inside me, but we're not limited to, transportation and prepositioning equipment and other resources and responses, supplies and commodities, medical care and transport, and evacuation and sheltering. Next, please. And can also include the use of lease of permanent or temporary generators for facilities that provide essential community services, dissemination of information to the public to provide warnings and guidance about health and safety hazards using various strategies such as flyers, public service announcements, or newspaper campaigns. And I suspect they haven't updated that recently, and that includes social media campaigns as well and virtual newspaper campaigns. Next, please. Yeah, SILs can get reimbursed through FEMA PA Category B, and it requires an MOU with the County Emergency Management, and the process identified in the FEMA addendum delivering personal assistance and services in congregate and non-congregate sheltering. And I'm going to let Shaylin, if you want to say a few words about that, going into the next slide.
This is Shaylin, and excuse me. Just want to point out that there are some good and promising practices and other allowable reimbursements under the public assistance program. And as Melissa explained and will continue to explain, if we think about public assistance, we're thinking of infrastructure related costs. And when we think about individual assistance, we're thinking of individual households, supports and services. And under public assistance, we have seen in Baton Rouge as well, Centers for Independent Living being able to get reimbursed for personal assistance services provided in shelters.
Excuse me 1 second, I'm just going to jump in. Priya, can you advance to the next slide? Sorry about that, Priya. Sorry, Shaylin.
And as well as in the next slide, we'll also touch upon this, as well as Center for Independent Living during the COVID-19 pandemic, working on emergency relocations out of nursing facilities into non-congregate settings, sheltering settings, with the supports and services needed to maintain independence, as well as working on long-term transition options. And this was allowed and identified through the addendum that Melissa mentioned. And really just want to emphasize that this is not necessarily an easy process. There are lots of barriers that tend to come into this, and a lot of advocacy that is still needed around the eligibility of Centers for Independent Livings as private nonprofits. And certainly there are other emergency protective measures that are allowed as reimbursements that your Center for Independent Living may provide in a disaster response at a shelter, at a disaster recovery shelter, and these types of things. So we're happy to talk more on that at another time, as we could surely spend probably a whole training on this piece by itself, but is a advocacy tool that's continued to be needed, and certainly an advocacy area as an organization. But I see Todd has his hand up.
Hey, thanks, Shaylin. And I just wanted to, you sparked my memory of a meeting we were in yesterday with Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, in which Marcy Roth pointed out very correctly that thousands of lives were lost because of the inability for CILs to be able to do that type of work. But very briefly, all I want to say is that I'll have a synopsis or something of that we can use to share with our IL centers that has to do with that work that we've been doing consistently with civil rights and civil liberties for some time.
And this is Shaylin. Also, we will share some supplementary materials that will go with today's training, like a acronym sheet, as well as a resource sheet. And in that also identifies a resource around disability rights in disasters, as well as how to file complaints, and that's another area that we can provide technical assistance around if folks need. And also just want to highlight really the importance of having those emergency management MOUs, memorandums of understanding with your emergency management agencies in order to really tackle this type of process. But I think that's all I have for now. We'll certainly have more. I can always address any questions that folks may have on this in the future as well. Back to you,
Thank you.
Lois.
Thank you so much, Shayla. And I'm going to ask Priya to go back to slide 39, because in my excitement to tell you about getting reimbursement, I didn't fully read slide 39. And for access purposes, I want to do that. Thank you. So the FEMA Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, we affectionately call it PUPA-G. FEMA provides supplemental federal grant assistance for debris removal, emergency protective measures, and the restoration of disaster damaged publicly owned facilities and specific facilities of certain private nonprofit organizations throughout the public assistance program. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone had the opportunity to hear that. And now if we can return back to slide 42. Thank you, Priya. So we talked about public assistance, right? No,
I see your hand up, Aubrey.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, could you explain a little further how MOUs work? Because I'm not quite clear on how those work.
Basically what it is, and jump in anyone from the partnership team, is you get a memorandum of understanding in place. Ideally, you get it in place before the disaster. An MOU, they say an MOU isn't a contract. An MOU, if it involves money or you doing something for someone, it's called consideration, is often a contract. But they say it's a memorandum of understanding. Sometimes it's a contract, sometimes it's not. Spoiler alert, most of the time it is a contract where you say, if this disaster happens, we'll provide X. And in the ideal world that we all want, there'll be contracts with Centers for Independent Living to provide personal assistance in shelters should there be disasters. So an MOU is a memorandum of understanding. Does that make any sense?
In addition to that question, what do you mean by personal assistance? Do you mean like caregiving? Caregiving, someone who helps someone get dressed, toilet, bathe, eat, get out of bed, those kinds of things. Like a personal care attendant, you might call it there. Does that answer your questions? Yeah, that answers my questions. I'm just a little unclear because our organization doesn't provide that type of service.
Okay, if you don't, okay. And that's for centers more that do. There could be other things that you do in, I'm thinking in terms of possibly peer support or something like that, but
Shaylin, as well as you may go into a shelter and provide, as Melissa mentioned, peer support, but also information and resources, maybe other services that your SIL provides. And those could potentially be reimbursable costs, as well as other outreach materials and information in accessible formats. We can certainly send more information around this. There's also been a lot of work around tools and resources to navigate this process and what it looks like for Centers for Independent Living with templates of MOUs that folks can use to start those conversations with your local emergency management agencies. But that's also really at the core of it, is having those relationships, talking with your local county emergency management agencies on these process and creating these agreements. But we'll make sure those resources are added in the resource document today as well.
Great, thank you so much.
and you get a monster plastic finger puppet with arms. Just saying. Okay.
I love prizes.
Prizes are great. Prizes are just, prizes are important. So for individual assistance are services to households, including temporary housing, crisis counseling to survivors, social emotional connections to the community. By crisis counseling, don't think therapy. Think something a lot less than therapy, a lot more brief than therapy, a lot less intensive than therapy, but it's some crisis counseling, disaster case management, and that's info to access emergency services. Counterintuitively, it was my experience and the experience of people that have been doing this a lot longer than me, is that disaster case management often, even though the purpose is to connect you to access emergency services, often isn't stood up until 6 months after the disaster. Go figure. Legal services, some legal services, and some unemployment services. And by the way, the other thing I didn't say is I've been doing disability rights work and disability justice work for my entire adult and before I was an adult life. And I just came to the disaster world about, well, it's 5 years ago now in 2017. Can't believe that. Next, please. So who is eligible for individual assistance, you might be wondering. Individual assistance is for individuals and households who have sustained losses due to disasters. The applicant must be a U.S. citizen, a non-citizen national, or qualified. And I apologize in advance for using this word, but this is the term that FEMA uses, a qualified alien. And I hate that word. I think it's dehumanizing, but it's a word that we have to use. And I'm going to tell you what they mean by that. So a qualified alien includes individuals who are lawful permanent residents of the United States, they're green card holders. They're asylees, refugees, or aliens whose deportation status is being withheld. Aliens paroled into the US for at least 1 year. Aliens granted conditional entry per law effective prior to April 1st, 1980. Cuban Haitian entrants. Certain aliens subjected to extreme cruelty or have been a victim of human services tracking, including persons with Tier U visas. So that is who they mean by, and again, I apologize for the word qualified alien. I'm going to talk about a little bit more about people who are documented versus people undocumented. FEMA must be able to verify an applicant's identity. They must be able to verify the applicant's insurance or other forms of disaster assistance received can't meet their disaster cause needs. So I have homeowner's insurance. I could deduct what my homeowner's insurance covers first. And the applicant's necessary expenses and serious needs that are directly caused by the disaster. Next, please. Now, I mentioned people who are undocumented. I want to talk about protected areas because on October 27th, 2021, recently, last fall, DHS Secretary Mayorkas issued new policy on immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Patrol, CBP. And it says, to the fullest extent possible, we should not take an enforcement action in or near a location that would restrain people's access to essential services or engagement in essential activities. Such a location is referred to as a protected area. Now let's go to the next slide and see what they mean by that a little bit more. So a protected area is a place where disaster emergency response and relief is being provided. This includes along evacuation routes, where shelter or emergency supplies, food or water are distributed, and where registration for disaster-related family assistance or family reunification is underway. ICE and CBP is told not to go there. That's just something good to know and to be able to tell consumers because people are very suspicious with very good reason. Next.
This is Priya. I see Mariah's hand up.
Oh, thank you, Priya. Sorry. I have a limited view. Yes.
Hi, this is Mariah.
Hi,
So
Mariah.
my question would be, so they're told not to go there. Is there anybody enforcing that, or are they still able to go in there into those protected areas?
They're
Do you know what I
told,
mean?
yeah, I know. This is Melissa. I know exactly what you mean. And they're told not to go there. I'm going to ask Herman if he knows any more than I do, or anyone else on the partnership team. They know any more. I haven't heard of ICE or CBP going there. That doesn't mean they haven't.
Mhm.
That's accurate. This is Herman. As the Emergency Operations Center activates, they get a reminder of this, and over the last couple of years, and educating the undocumented community in our country about this, we have not heard of complaints. But that's the extreme situation that if it happens and nobody hears about it, it could be the worst case scenario.
Exactly. Todd, I see you have a question. Oh, and you get a chartreuse colored skateboard for your finger skateboard.
Thank
How
you.
many times do you get a finger skateboard? Yes. Todd?
Oh, thanks, Melissa. Yeah, and I wanted to point out, and Herman, and Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the work that the partnership has been doing in other countries, including what is happening in Afghanistan and other countries, we're seeing a lot more migration and immigration issues. So these issues will probably become more and more important as time goes on. So I think what a lot of the questions that we may have haven't even been answered yet. There's still a lot of immigration issues that are coming up, and I'd love to have that conversation, offline, because we do have people who are coming into this country from other countries as evacuees and oh gosh, help me out here, the refugees, and they have disabilities and need the supports that we can provide. So it is an area that's going to continue to grow, and we should be prepared for it. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And now we're going to go to the national planning frameworks. And again, you're saying, why is she doing all these terms? It's so we can have credibility at the table and a common understanding. So the national planning frameworks describe how the whole community works together to achieve the national preparedness goal. The national preparedness goal is to have a secure and resilient nation with the capabilities required across the whole community to prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond to, and recover from the threats and hazards that pose the greatest risk. That goal is the cornerstone for the implementation of the national preparedness system. There's 5 mission areas, and those mission areas are prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. Again, that's prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. Next slide, please. Now, the National Incident Management System, our NIMS, NIMS, that guides all levels of local government, non-governmental organizations, which are called NGOs, and the private sector to work together to prevent, protect against, mitigate, respond to, and recover from incidents. It provides stakeholders, which is us, ding, 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 across the whole community with the shared vocabulary. See, they're saying it too, the shared vocabulary and processes to successfully deliver the capabilities described in the national preparedness system. So they want everyone to have a shared vocabulary too, because they understand why that's important. Next, please. So whose responsibility is sheltering? This flows into what we're doing next, trust me. It's always local or county government. They always have that responsibility. Sometimes the state also shares in that responsibility. Now, local government might contract with other entities such as the Red Cross, but the legal obligations still rest back in the state. It's always back to the state. Not to say that Red Cross doesn't have obligations, but the state, local government entities always have the larger obligations. Sometimes the county manages shelters and other entities like Red Cross supplement those services. That's just another way of doing it. And sometimes they're pop-up shelters. Pop-up shelters might be faith-based, community, or other. Once someone receives a penny of federal funding, they have obligations under the Rehabilitation Act and their obligations under the ADA in a faith-based shelter, even though they're not, if they just admit people of their own faith, there are no ADA obligations. Once they let someone in who's not a person of their faith, they become a community shelter and they have obligations under the ADA. And if they have federal funds, they have existing obligations anywhere. So that's pop-up shelters. And pop-up shelters often, sometimes a pop-up shelter will get taken over, and that's not a hostile takeover. That's usually the county will come in and will say, please help us do this. You know, it's not like hostile. Yes, I see Aubrey has a question.
Yes, this is Aubrey. So you said that as soon as a pop-up shelter that is run by an organization of faith allows someone outside of their faith to enter into the shelter, then then ADA applies to them.
Yep.
So are they by law allowed to discriminate against people who are not of their faith coming into their pop-up shelters?
Okay, I can have a private, I'm gonna make up a religion. I'm gonna call it C religion. You know, it has nothing to do with any religion. It's totally made up, okay? The letter C, not standing for any religion. So I'm a member of the C faith. And I am entitled to have a shelter just for members of my faith, kind of like a private club, private entity. I am allowed to do that. Once I get federal resources, I'm not allowed to do that. Once I get county resources, I'm not allowed to do that. Once I let other people in, I'm not allowed to do that. Does that make sense? And just so you know, and some people don't know this already, and we forget it, religious entities, unless they go into another business of doing something for the private sector, have no obligations under the ADA.
This is Herman. All this being true, just a reminder, there are private companies that offer such services to only their employees.
Right,
So it's not only the religious sector.
right. It's analogous to that. That's absolutely true. Does that answer your question, Aubrey?
Yes, thank you.
And Aubrey gets a plastic spotted tiger, a small one. Next, please. Now we're going to look at emergency support functions. They're called ESFs. If you don't get this in the first bounce or the second bounce, that's okay. You can just read it again. You're going to have a copy of the slide deck after you leave today and in the coming days. Very soon, you'll have a copy of the slide deck. And emergency support functions, or ESFs, provide the structure for coordinating federal interagency support for a federal response to an incident. ESFs describe the federal coordinating structure that group resources and capabilities into the functional areas most frequently needed in national response. So it describes the federal coordinating structures that group the resources and capabilities into these functional areas that are mostly needed. So it's clumping things in areas, and that's from the National Response Framework. Next, please. And there are 15 emergency support functions that are federal. States have different ESFs. Washington has your ESF emergency plan, and it's called the KEMP. And I think you have 20 ESFs, and it parallels the federal emergency response systems. And you have a link to that, and you can check out your specific ones whenever you want to, which is really exciting. And just to know, the KEMP provides the framework for statewide mitigation, preparedness, including prevention and protection, response and recovery activities, while providing a structure for plan consistency throughout the state and facilitating interoperability between local, state, and federal governments. Next, please. Now, this is all good, but there's some not so good news. We have ESF 6 and ESF 8. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. There are gaps in emergency management support functions. It's not inherently inclusive of the rights and needs of people with disabilities. And there's a gap in what people with disabilities need that none of the ESFs cover. That gap can lead to institutionalization of disabled people. Next, please. So ESF 6, Emergency Support Function 6, coordinates and clumps the delivery. It coordinates the delivery and kind of clumps things together of mass care, emergency assistance, housing, and human services within local, tribal, and state response and recovery needs when they exceed their capabilities. So again, ESF 6 is a clump of things that includes mass care, emergency assistance, housing, and human services. In my head, I code it as the human servicey kind of ESF. That's ESF 6 is human servicey. That's what I say to myself in my head that helps me remember those other things like mass care, emergency assistance, and housing. It's not just human services. And the next one, slide, please. Now, ESF 8 provides planning and coordination of federal public health, healthcare delivery, and emergency responses to minimize and/or prevent health emergencies from occurring. to detect and characterize health incidents, provide medical care and human services to those affected, reduce the public health and human services effects on the community, and enhance community resiliency to respond to a disaster. So you know how I said the ESF 6 was human service, even though it includes housing and emergency response? ESF 8 is healthcare related, like public health and healthcare related. And between ESF 6 and ESF 8, there's a gap. There's actually gaps throughout the ESFs, and that's how people with disabilities end up being institutionalized. That it's not smooth. ESF 6 and ESF 8 don't always talk back and forth to each other and don't always know all of the same things. We're going to talk about the dangers that result from that in a few minutes. But first, I want to know your questions so far.
Melissa, this is, go ahead, Kimberly.
Hi, Kimberly.
Get that down so you can hear me better.
We can
Hi.
hear you better now. We can hear you a little bit before. I couldn't make out what you're saying, but now it's much clearer for everybody.
Okay, thanks. Of a number of slides back, you had mentioned about the insurance needs, and I'm assuming like homeowners insurance. So
Mhm.
is someone better off if they did not,
No.
let's say, no?
I don't mean to cut you off. Finish your thought.
But yeah, okay, so you knew where I was going with that. If it's
But
like, if
please
you
go
could
ahead.
access it without, if you got more money without the insurance, are you better off without having insurance?
Absolutely, categorically no. I will usually say, because there is a lawyer that lives inside me, I'll say, well, it could be this or it could be that. Definitively no. And let me tell you why. The maximum amount you can get is around from FEMA is around $34,000, which isn't going to cover the replacement of your house. And the average amount they give tends to be like in the single thousands of dollars, like some, depending on the disasters, between $2,000 and $5,000 or $7,000 per. So it's really a very small amount of money they give you. They don't cover mold damage. There's lots of things that aren't covered in FEMA. There's lots of things, sadly, that aren't covered by your homeowner's insurance. Homeowner's insurance will not cover, unless you have flood insurance, will not cover water damage from floods.
Right.
So just know there's lots of things. And if you have to get flood insurance, you have to live in a floodplain, and it's exorbitantly expensive. It's just very, very expensive. You're never better off not having insurance. And if you have a mortgage, guess what? You have homeowners insurance. FEMA is there to fill in gaps, really, and give you a small amount of money. Does that make sense? And I want to be really crystal clear about that. Everyone should have as much, in my opinion, as much insurance as possible, but homeowners insurance definitely. Yes, Jesse.
Thank you.
Yeah, to piggyback off that question.
Excuse me, and you get a little purple plastic violin. Doesn't really play though. Yes. Okay, Jesse. Sorry.
To piggyback off what Kim said, but instead of homeowners insurance, I do have renters insurance in case all my stuff burns up and whatever. But I'm also thinking about people with disabilities that have a lot of medical stuff that and they don't have renters insurance. In case a flooding happens or an earthquake or a wildfire, how are their medical stuff covered? Does FEMA cover? Do they replace everything, or is it up to a certain amount?
That's a complex question. People have to reapply and get it through Medicaid a lot of the time if they're on Medicaid. Herman and Shaylin, if you want to jump in here, feel free.
Melissa, this is Todd as well. And something that we fought for with the partnership for many years was to not have a cap when it comes to, so that $35,000 for your home being destroyed or whatever portion of it does not cover durable medical equipment.
Right. Thank you, Todd. I knew that, but it went out of my head for a second. Yes. Yes, it doesn't, but it can be a slow process. It's not something that happens instantaneously.
This is Herman, and just to wrap it up, as Melissa was explaining, best to reach out to the provider and who funded the equipment, be it Medicaid or private Medicare or private insurance, VA, Veterans Administration. Then, as Todd was explaining a few years ago, if somebody donated to the lost piece of equipment, that got subtracted from the max that FEMA could give you. And
Right.
what now, as Todd was explaining, if someone, it could be an AT rehab, right, center. If you get the equipment donated, it will not count against your household IA application. But if you don't have any other source, you can try. And as Melissa was explaining, it's a lot of back and forth.
Right.
help?
And you could also go to your Voc Rehab if you get your equipment from Voc Rehab. There's no guarantees. They'll just try every avenue possible. Any other questions?
Yeah, one quick one. Desi asks, in Washington State, does FEMA help to cover hospitalization costs for people who were hospitalized due to COVID? And there's a little tricky, but I'll let you explain that one.
That's Medicaid. That's going to be your health insurance that does that. That's not going to be through FEMA.
And that's kind of why I rushed to put in an answer that I put in originally to Desiree, but I again then put it in for everyone else, and that is ask your representatives to support the Ready and Derma Act.
This is Herman. Through the current COVID public health emergency, prevention and treatment is federally covered if no other sources can support. So
Right.
that's how it is happening at this time.
Right. It's a last resort kind of thing. And Desiree?
Hi, this is Desiree. So the reason why I was asking that is because I had someone who had recently moved to this state have the SIL from Missouri reach out to a local SIL for where they live now to ask that question, because in Missouri, FEMA was paying whatever their medical insurance was not covering. So that's why I had that question.
Herman, do you want to add to that?
This is Herman. Certainly, state by state health department may be choosing which options and which not to bring into states, as in within disasters. And I think Melissa was saying, and that's where educating your elected officials who can make the direct calls can help. And as well in conversations with your public health departments, which I know you have good relationships with.
And I'm going to move us along, and all your questions, if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. All your questions will be answered, and we might not be able to get to all of them today. We'll get you FAQ sheets if there's questions we don't get to answer, but I just want to make sure we get through our material. So we're getting to the really cool part too. Next slide, please. Civil rights obligations. Next, Priya. Non-discrimination during disasters. So the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So Homeland Security reminds its recipients, and it's not a friendly reminder, it's a, hey, you got to do this, it's a law reminder, of their obligations to ensure that individuals and communities affected by disasters do not face unlawful discrimination in the provision of federally assisted services to disaster survivors. Yay. Next slide. Spoiler, it doesn't always happen. Under federal civil rights laws, sheltering services and facilities must be accessible to children and adults with disabilities. Sheltering and temporary housing of persons with disabilities must take place in the most integrated setting appropriate to the needs of that person. Next, please. Anyone heard the appropriate to the needs of that language before? You can put it in the chat. There's still prizes for people who put things in the chat, and Priya can call it out, or someone can call it out. Okay. Now, what they've got to do, what does non-discrimination mean? It's easy to say you can't discriminate. Well, what the heck do we mean by discrimination, particularly when it's around disability? There has to ensure that effective communication with impacted populations during response and related recovery. This includes, but is not limited to, providing print materials in large print and braille, website accessibility, open caption of videos, and qualified sign language interpreters. And this is from the Department of Homeland Security. Next. Now I'm going to name some civil rights laws that protect people with disabilities during disasters. There's the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and I put down the fancy language, 29 USC section 701 et sec, because there's been fancy, and section 504 creates the obligation not to discriminate against people with disabilities who are recipients and subrecipients of federal funds. Next, please. We all know the Rehab Act usually is 504, but there's lots of other sections like 508, and that does screen material, etc. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, 42 USC section 12102 et sec, that just means and more. And it protects the rights of people with disabilities, including during disasters. Next, please. The Olmstead decision, and that's Olmstead versus LC 527 US 581. The Olmstead decision, it's not a law. It's a Supreme Court decision interpreting the Americans with Disabilities Act that states that people with disabilities must receive services in the most integrated setting that meets their needs. Most integrated setting that meets their needs. Not language that rolls easily off my tongue, but I'll take it from the Supreme Court interpreting Olmstead. And that applies during disasters because, next slide, please. And then there's the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, Public Law 111, JAS 260. And what that does is updates federal communications law to increase the access of persons with disabilities to modern communications. So taking us out of the dark ages that weren't that long ago. Next, please. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and that's 20 USC section 1400, 2004. And you might be saying, what does IDEA got to do with disasters, Melissa? I like IDEA as much as the next person, as much as the next advocate, but what is it? It requires a free and appropriate public education for children with disabilities between 3 and 21. I know that. What's that got to do with disasters? What it has to do with disasters is we run into circumstances a lot where when recovery starts and schools start to reopen, kids with IEPs and 504 plans are told, we're not ready for you to come to school yet. Well, the parent still has to go to work and they still need to get an education, or you're not ready to come to school yet, or some version of excluding the kid. That's illegal. That's why it's important to know about that. Next, please. And some other laws are the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act. And that is what's triggered when there's a federal declaration of a disaster. Post-Katrina Management Reform Act of 2006, we call that PCAMRA. And what PCAMRA did is it amended the Stafford Act to, among other things, require that there be an Office of Disability Integration and Coordination created at FEMA. Then there's the Integrated Public Alerts and Warning Systems, or IPAWS, and Fair Housing Amendments Act. Next, please. This is the most important slide in this whole training. So if you leave here today with nothing else, what I want you to leave here today with, this is my personal preference, is that civil rights of people with disabilities are never, in all caps, suspended during disasters. We get a lot, we protect your civil rights, but you got to understand it's a disaster. That's when you most need your civil rights, folks. Next, please. So we talked about equally effective communication. We talked about laws that affect people with disabilities, that protect people with disabilities. And now we're going to talk about what we mean by equal access to emergency and disaster-related programs and services. Next, please. So equal access to disaster-related programs and services means you can't discriminate against people with disabilities. Okay, what does that mean? Next, please. That means emergency and disaster-related programs and services must be accessible. And this includes planning meetings, emergency alerts, transportation, shelters, disaster recovery centers, and exercises. Next, please. And other programs and services must provide equally effective communication, including sign language, including tactile sign language interpreters for people that are deafblind, video relay interpreting, VRI, electronic material that is accessible, large print, and under FEMA, plain language or pictograms. That's not an ADA requirement, that's a requirement within FEMA. Next, please. And the next part of equal access to disaster-related programs and services is that notification must be accessible. Now, notification should be interpreted into ASL, but must be live captions. Should be interpreted. I didn't write the law. They didn't ask. Well, they asked me, but they didn't listen to me. Should be interpreted. Must have live captions. Alternative to door knocks must be used, and maps must be accessible to people with visual disabilities and people who don't read print. Next, please. And we talk about evacuation. Understand we're talking about two things: building evacuation, leaving your workplace, leaving your home, and geographic area evacuation. Next, please. And we're going to go to shelters now. Shelters must not discriminate on the basis of disability. What all does that mean? Next slide, please. This includes physical or structural accessibility, and it means there must be an ADA compliant path of travel, accessible toilets, showers, cots, and the registration area and all other spaces must be accessible. Equally effective communication must be provided in the shelter. That could be video or on-site interpreters, print materials in multiple formats, sign language alternatives, announcements, etc. Signage alternatives, sorry, announcements, etc. Next slide, please.
And as we're moving to the next slide, Todd says in chat, keep in mind our Washington and County FAST teams.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And this includes quiet areas. Also, service animals must be allowed in shelters. Service animals are dogs or miniature horses that are trained to assist a person with a disability. They must be allowed. Personal assistance must be allowed. Personal assistance services must be provided. Dietary accommodations because of a disability must be provided. And there can't be any segregation or separation. Next, please.
This is Priya. I see Jesse's hand up, as
Okay,
well as
Jesse.
Aubrey's hand.
Jesse, then Aubrey.
How do you determine what is an eligible service animal? And what I'm trying to say here is that we get a lot of people that bring their personal animals that have not been trained to be service animal, and they say it is a service animal. So how do we determine that? You know,
You ask the person two questions. Is it a service animal? And is it trained to do tasks for you? That service animal must be housebroken and under the owner's control. No license, no training, no requirements. That's how you determine that.
okay.
Okay, thank you. And your fabulous prize, Jesse, is you get a little tiny German Shepherd, blasted German Shepherd, because you asked a service animal question. Okay, Aubrey.
Yeah, this is Aubrey. So I have a question about not being able to refuse personal assistance. They must be allowed in shelters, because my understanding is currently in shelters, people cannot receive personal assistance like a home care aid or whatever. They can't get personal assistance in shelters currently. So how is this enforced in a, do you understand my question?
Yeah, they are legally entitled to get personal assistance in shelters.
So they cannot deny, even
Right.
right now, outside of an emergency, they cannot deny a personal assistance in a shelter.
I'm talking about in an emergency shelter.
Okay, so I guess that's why I'm a little confused. It's allowed in emergency shelters, but not allowed.
I don't know what the statute is. I don't know what the law is in a regular emergency in like a shelter for people experiencing homelessness. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to, and I think you have a strong case that they should be allowed to be in there. So I don't see why they wouldn't, but I'd need to get more of the specific facts. I'm glad to talk to you more about that.
Okay.
But the conversation today is limited to disaster shelters. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And Aubrey gets a pink miniature horse. Just saying.
Actually.
Okay. Next. Next slide, Priya.
This is as we move on to the next slide. I just want to read a comment from Todd. Todd says, I will schedule a conversation with Deb Veltri, Red Cross Disability Integration, and others for an in-depth conversation on service animals and pets in Washington State and beyond. Desiree responds, thank you, Todd. I believe that is really needed with as many calls as we are getting.
Thank you, Todd, for doing that. That is huge. Todd, you have the fabulous virtual fabulous prize of your choice. That's kind of the grand virtual fabulous prize. Now, disaster-related programs and services must be provided in the most integrated setting, most appropriate to the needs of a person with a disability, like the court said in the Olmstead decision. And we're going to take a look at what that means. Next, please. Take a look at what that means in a few minutes. A word about registries. You don't have registries in Washington State right now. I think you might have one in a county, but I just want to give you this word as an advocate. People have a new and improved registries. Registries are expensive. They're not always used in disasters. They're based on the assumption that we, people with disabilities, are always at home. And they create a sense of false expectations in people with disabilities. I don't have to plan. They're going to come from the registry and get me and bring me to safety when it comes down to me. So always be cautious with registries. Registries are not a good idea. Registries do not work. And we've seen that in city after city after city. I think particularly the city of Houston, which has invested millions and millions and millions of dollars into their registry. And in most disasters, they don't even use it. Mariah. You're mute, Mariah.
Sorry. Yep, I couldn't find it. This is
I totally get that.
What is a registry?
A registry is where a person with a disability can register. They're usually pretty simple. I say, I use a wheelchair and come to my house with an accessible vehicle if there's a disaster, or I'm blind, or I use dialysis, and which could mislead someone into thinking that they would get dialysis treatment kind of automatically once there's a disaster. It's usually not practical and it doesn't work. But thank you for asking that question. And you get a very small water balloon.
This is Shaylin, and just want to add to that. A lot of times we see emergency management agencies trying to find a solution to fill the gaps that we always see in disasters and emergencies. And they think a registry is that quote unquote solution, but it is oftentimes, as Melissa explained, really creates that false sense of security, false expectations that magical solutions will come to your door and save you in a disaster, when oftentimes that's not the case. Just wanted to add to that point, and it's our job as Centers for Independent Living, as advocates, to really say this is not a good solution and holding them accountable to their legal obligations to provide equal access. But I see also Todd has his hand up.
Thanks, Shaylin. This is Todd. I very quickly just want to point out that Jesse and I had a conversation with two new emergency operations specialists in Marysville today. And this issue came up in the conversation. And it also included public alerts and warning systems. There are many programs out there that people can sign up for, but it is CFI, it will be CFI policy that we do not that we encourage people to sign up for these early alerts, warning systems, and things along those lines. However, we always want to give them a caveat that the larger the disaster, they should never, ever expect that somebody is going to be coming prepared for whatever it is that they may have checked the box on in a program. So to even go beyond registries, we want to start to use the mindset of including public alerts and warning system programs.
Thank you, Todd. And I'm going to ask us to go to the next slide. And we've got about 10 more slides to get through. We can do that's easily doable, but they're really important slides. I want to make sure you get that information. We're going to talk about institutionalization during and after disasters. Next, please. Why is there institutionalization during and after disasters? Why does it happen so often? It happens because of institutional bias. And institutional bias is the conscious or unconscious belief that people are better with disabilities, belong or better off in institutions, including nursing facilities. Ageism is often, but not always, a factor. Next, please. Give you some examples of bias. Institutional bias is literally systemic bias. In recent disasters, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, issued blanket 1135 waivers so that 3-day hospital stay is no longer required before a person is transferred to a long-term care facility. It also waives pre-admission screening in nursing homes. Next, please. And under the 1135 waivers, people can be placed in nursing facilities, from their own home. Say they call 911 because they can't get out of bed, they have a pressure sore, they can't get food, there's a problem, they call 911, there's a problem that can be easily fixed at home. They don't have personal assistance. Someone can say, I think you're better off in a nursing home, dear. Or you can get put into an institution from a hospital emergency department. I have a medical need that doesn't requires maybe hospitalization, certainly doesn't require long-term institutionalization, not that anything does. You can get institutionalized from a nursing home because it's too busy and too crowded. We're going to send you to a nursing home, dear. And hospital rooms, if will benefit another patient. They don't even have to pretend that it's going to benefit you, but if it benefits, if Sally next to you or Joe next to you needs to be in the hospital more, they think, then you can go to an institution. Next, please. So what are the consequences of institutionalization? And I know you all know the consequences of institutionalization, but you just got to list it because I think it's important for us to always remember it. People lose their independence. People get lost. People get sick. People lose their social networks, their jobs, and their homes, and people die. And to the extent that we ever had to argue that any of this was true, and we used to have to argue that it was true, COVID sadly has confirmed exactly how true that is, but it was always true before that. Next slide, please. People with disabilities get relegated to charity in disasters. And organizations that respond in times of disasters and this is not to bash those organizations, these are really good organizations with really fine people that do fine work, but they're things like the VALS, the Voluntary Agency Liaison Specialists, the VOAs, the Voluntary Organizations Active in Disasters, the COADs, Community Organizations Active in Disasters. There's nothing wrong with these organizations and they do a whole lot of things well. But the government is giving them the responsibility for protecting our civil rights. I'm pretty sure they would say that's not their job, and we know that that's not their job, and somehow our civil rights get relegated to charities, and we need to stop being okay about that. Next, please. So civil rights obligation are left to volunteers. Durable medical equipment, consumable medical supplies, and other disaster resources are for donations and charitable solutions. The equipment that Medicaid pay for, Melissa, that you have the right to, that Medicare paid for, Medicaid paid for, the government paid for, that we decided you need. Why don't you see if you can get someone to pay for that for you? That will be easier and quicker. Next, please. Now let's talk about individual and household recovery for just a bit. Individual and household recovery includes temporary and permanent housing, your household's recovery, your household getting back together, resuming daily work, school, having transportation, childcare, getting groceries, health maintenance, doing all the things you used to do before the disaster. That's as part of individual and household disaster recovery. Next, please. And on a bigger scale, it includes rebuilding the community. And hopefully incorporating universal design principles. We need to advocate for that. And that's what centers can do. And centers could do that as a fee-for-service thing at some point. See if we could get to that. Transportation, housing, education, and jobs. So that's a larger scale community recovery. Next, please. And again, it includes childcare, mitigation, and disaster resilience. Next, please.
As we move on to our last few slides here, Todd says in chat, CFI and PIDS worked for years to create a disability integration resource within the American Red Cross. And Todd also adds VOADs and COADs and other volunteer orgs are not there yet.
No, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about having a seat at the emergency management table. And you folks know how to do this, but stay involved in the planning stages. Stay involved when there's exercises, as you did for Cascadia Rising. Be involved in the comprehensive emergency management plan. Make sure that there's seats at local, county, and state emergency operations centers, the EOCs. You want to be there. You want to make it easier for them to include you than not include you. And that could be being on their listserv, so you automatically get the invitation, or from knowing that it'll be more of a pain in the neck to not invite you than to invite you, the consequences of that. So just, you want to get, we're advocates. We all know how to do that. Next, please. And again, having a seat at the emergency management table, what you need to do. We know how to do this. Invite yourselves and build the table. Embed yourself. Get on the email listserv automatically. Get invited automatically. Hang out with them. Go to their regular monthly meetings. Maintain nurture relationships. Have coffee sometime. Find out how somebody's grandkids or kids are doing. Get to know each other. Humanize each other. Get to know each other as people. Invite emergency management staff to your event. When you had a conference, you invited emergency management staff to your events, and that was great, an amazing, wonderful, great practice. And above all, remember, nothing about us without us, everybody. So I'm going to open the floor for some questions now, and I bet you have some.
This is Todd, and I was just typing madly, which is a real bad hunt and pack experience.
I know. I'm Melissa. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to point out to everyone that that we have resources that are available to us, and a lot of our the staff will come to me right away. And what I'd encourage you to do is we, as Melissa was pointing out, we have a new Washington Emergency Management Division position being created for disability access and functional needs. That person should be on your speed dial. Danielle Bailey should be on your speed dial, Region 10 FEMA, Deb Veltri, Jim House. All of these people you should be connecting with directly. You don't have to go through me. We need to, we want to expand our footprint and force multiply. Thank you.
And links to them are in the resources. We don't have to Jim House specifically, but we have to CIEP. And we have specifically to Danielle Bailey that link. And Danielle, like, we always include the emergency specialist from the region, and Danielle is outstanding. So you have a privilege to have someone great like Danielle. So that's great. Other questions? Thoughts, comments? I'm going to ask you all. Do you have any other questions? I don't see any questions. That's dangerous because
I do. I really, it's a question and a statement, and it's due my fellow Washingtonians on this call. Are you aware of some of the training that we are involved with at the state level and at the community level? And what I mean by that is we have made it available so that free training for any kind of incident command systems work that is being done at the local level is available to our center. And in most cases, Leah will pay you to take that training. The other thing I wanted to point out is that G197, which is a disability connection to, and I'm going to screw this up, but it is a liaison type training between disability access and functional needs and emergency management. It is a complex training that is taking the place of L197 at the FEMA level until they do that. We are creating that in Washington State right now. So please be aware of that, and I will get you all the information you could ever want to know about it.
Thank you, Todd. This is Melissa. I'd like to know what's the most important thing that you all learned today. So if anyone wants to shout out or put in the chat the most important thing that you learned today that you didn't know. I see people, I think, typing. And can anyone shout the most important thing that I think you learned today?
Yeah, you said that, this is Aubrey, that civil rights are not suspended just because of an
Yay.
emergency.
Yay, yay. Aubrey gets a grand fabulous prize of her choice. And we think people don't say that until my local newspaper wrote an article, and it was for a woman who's a pediatrician who wrote a great article and it was an op-ed piece that she got paid to write for the local Hartford paper. And then it's a shame that the ADA and the Rehab Act are suspended during disasters. Like, she literally said those words. And I sent back a very short, terse letter to the editor, and they got it. But yeah, it really happens. That's not just something we're making up. It really happens. So what were important things that people learned today?
Disaster declarations and emergency declarations for sure.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
This is Mariah.
Before. Yes, Mariah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. He might have been here.
I
Go ahead.
think there was a lot of information for my brain to like
Oh, yeah.
go through, so I'm excited.
Oh yeah,
to get the things, but I feel like the most one of the things that was really helpful was the information about who can apply for what as far as programs, like what the state's responsibilities are versus like a personal responsibility. So I found that helpful if somebody calls and has specific questions, if they're dealing with their own emergency type of situation too.
Great. And Aubrey has her hand up.
This is Aubrey, just to couple with what Mariah's saying about I just lost it. I'm so sorry. She was saying the eligible, who's eligible. The thing I found most interesting was that it's the responsibility of the state to provide shelter options. And that was very surprising and very interesting, because I think a lot of times when you're in the middle of things, people will pass the buck, so to speak, for, oh no, this person's responsible, no, that person's responsible, and it's actually the state. So,
well, I want to clarify. Shelters are typically provided by local and county government and sometimes the state.
right.
The legal obligation is on the government, though. It's not
Right,
on
that's
Red
what I
Cross.
meant. The legal.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant. Yeah,
That's what I
okay.
meant. Mhm.
Great. And Shaylin, I know you have a couple things you want to say in closing, including when we next get together.
This is Shaylin, and really thank you all for your time and all the really great questions. Certainly keep them coming towards us if you have them. We know this was a lot of information, and as we say, kind of a brain dump. So if there's any clarification or questions folks have, our contact information is in the PowerPoint, and surely Todd and Leah can get you connected directly to us if you don't have our contact information. Also want to note that in the chat, we added a link, and we'll send this out in email as well. We'd love to hear your feedback on today's training. Shouldn't take too much of your time and helps us continue to grow and strengthen our work, and appreciate folks' feedback on that. And also want to let folks know we'll have a flyer and more materials to share with your consumers and outreach in your community. But we will be having a training for consumers on disability rights in disasters on October 19th at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. Again, that information will be forthcoming to share within your networks, much more to come. We promise it won't be as jam-packed of information like today was. It will be a lot lighter, easier to digest and understand, and customized for your consumers.
Right, it won't be today. And I also just want to remind you, and I want to thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you folks. So thank you to Leah. Thank you everyone for coming today. And also you have resources that are in the slide deck with a lot of things that Todd talked about, and plus some more. And you also have an acronym sheet in case you forget what something stands for. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Have a great rest of your day.